Hello, welcome to another episode of In the Trenches with Gang Green. I'm your host, Bubbs. Today is Tuesday, January 14th. Hopefully everybody's having a good day so far today. This is episode 470 of the In the Trenches with Gang Green podcast. I thank you, as always, for joining me. And we've got some more New York Jets head coach and general manager news to discuss today on the podcast as the search continues and the search grows today for the New York Jets as they add another head coach candidate to the list. So we'll break that down. We'll get into some of the reported favorites for the job and where things currently stand as we get to the second week of this search and hopefully get closer to the ultimate end of this search and the, second round of interviews opening up. Feels like, ideally the end of this week into next week. Feels like you get the GM here relatively soon. But the Jets keep expanding. So who knows? This could continue for as long as, maybe longer than many of us expect. But we'll see. Continue to take it day by day and see what happens. So we'll break it all down today on the podcast, giving you the latest updates. As always, though, before we begin, we've got to get you the podcast partners, starting with our friends over at BetUS, America's favorite online sportsbook. Question of the day. It's been the question of the day. Let me know what you think in the comments section down below. Who do you want the Jets to hire as their next head coach? List continues to grow. There's a lot of names, 16 to be exact. So out of those, who do you want? Any guys that they haven't interviewed yet that you would like to see them interview? Let me know what you think in the comment section down below and click the link in the description to get a 125% sign-up bonus on your first 3 deposits up to $2,000 over at BetUS. The NFL playoffs are in full swing. And if you want to get in on the divisional round action, check out America's favorite online sportsbook. Also, our friends over at SeatGeek. If you're looking for tickets for NHL, NBA games, MLB season will be here before you know it. Any NFL playoff tickets or any of the best in entertainment, plays, concerts, shows, you name it, SeatGeek has it. And if it's your first time using SeatGeek, use promo code BUBSONSPORTS for $20 off your first purchase and get yourself out to some awesome events. And also Huga House. Special announcement, too, on Huga House. Starting January 17th, they will have sweatshirts. So it's not just their awesome variety of hats, but they'll also have sweatshirts starting on the 17th. And at checkout, use promo code BUBS for 15% off your first purchase and 30% off your second purchase. So check them out and get yourself some awesome swag. So here we go, episode 470. Make sure to please like and subscribe. Appreciate the support. We are only 12 subscribers away as of this recording from 500. So make sure to hit that subscribe button and let's get to that goal here very, very soon. And appreciate all those as well tuning in on all the different audio podcast platforms as well. So got some news, got some updates today on the New York Jets coaching search. With Mike Vrabel taking over the New England job, you kind of start to narrow down the list here a little bit more, or take a look at the list and take away one name from the list. And today or yesterday, Rich Cimini went on ESPN radio and had some discussions, provided some thoughts on where he stands right now with what he believes are the favorites for the New York Jets coaching job. So he believes it's Aaron Glenn and Brian Flores. I'm going to play this clip from Rich Cimini. It's a little bit of a longer clip. It's about 2 minutes long, but I want to play it because he provides a little bit more background in each candidate, where things stand, and why he believes they are the favorites for the Jets coaching job as we currently sit here on January 14th. I'll also provide a little bit more information as well on potential general manager pairings between these two coaches if one of these guys is hired, which feels like the direction of the Jets are heading in right now is either a Glenn or a Brian Flores. So here is Cimini on what he's hearing recently.
What else interests you out there right now in this coaching carousel, if you will?
Well, just as a footnote, this Jeff Ulbrich, they just announced that Jeff Ulbrich has completed his interview with the Jets.
Great.
I do not believe they will be hiring Jeff Ulbrich as their full-time coach. But I would say that the names that intrigue me and I think intrigue the Jets most right now are Aaron Glenn and Brian Flores. Now, they've already interviewed Glenn. Flores is going to come up this week. Obviously there's some very strict rules about when you can and can't talk to these coaches, but they've already interviewed Glenn. I think he'd be a very good choice for the Jets. Done a fabulous job as their D coordinator in Detroit. Former Jet. You guys have talked about this earlier today, how good a player he was with the Jets. And the one question, of course, is who would his offensive coordinator be? And I don't know the answer to that, but I think he's got a really good shot at this. This may come down to Jets versus Saints in the Aaron Glenn sweepstakes, if you want to call it that. Now, I've kept in touch with Aaron over the years, and I know from talking to people around him that he is really interested in the Jet job. I mean, it's been a job that he's had his eye on for several years, and I think he would love to come back home, so to speak, to coach the Jets. Flores, of course, has the head coaching experience. That makes him intriguing. He would do wonders with the Jet defense. Look what he's done in Minnesota. The downside is, he's got the loss. Not that it's a downside. He's got the pending lawsuit against the league. Not that would be a huge factor, but some skills were questioned in Miami. With management, he went through offensive coordinators there. We know how Tua felt about him. He was pretty public about that. So that would be the question with Flores. But I would say those are the two favorites at this point, the way I see it.
So there's Samini providing a little extra context than why I wanted to play the full clip there, even though it was a little bit longer, on where things stand with those two guys. Look, just starting with the whole Glenn perspective, he makes a lot of good points. Obviously, we've known that he's been really interested in the Jets job. Of course, played with the team, was an all-time great Jet, was there for the Parcells switch where he saw the culture change. He's now been a part of the Lions where he has seen a culture change there as well, came in under Dan Campbell's staff as the defensive coordinator in 2021 and has seen that team progressively get better now where they're fighting for a Super Bowl, after making the NFC title game last year, getting ready here to play in the divisional round and potentially make a run here as the 1 seed in the NFC. So he has seen it completely flip. He's got close connections with Parcells. You've heard some other coaches around the league, such as Sean Payton, talk very highly of him. He's well respected. Many believe he deserves an opportunity. And yeah, it feels like it could be him against the Saints. I do think the whole Mike McCarthy situation, which I want to get to here a little bit because I want to get to the whole Jet search as its own and kind of get to one thing I'm a little frustrated about this whole search, which we'll get to a little bit later before we move on from this. But the whole McCarthy thing does add a wrinkle in it. If McCarthy, who it feels like a team like the Saints could be interested in, if he were to go to New Orleans, let's say, obviously Chicago might be interested as well. That would open up where the Jets are probably the favorites or probably the one team for Aaron Glenn. And I also think Glenn, too, would probably favor the Jets over a New Orleans or any of those teams. Not just because of he's with the Jets and he's been with the Jets and he's mentioned in the past that this would be his dream job. I also think the New Orleans situation, to me, is horrible. And I know a lot of people look at the Jets situation as being really bad. I think the Saints are the least likable destination, in my opinion. Just where they are cap space-wise, where they are talent-wise on that roster. They don't have much room. They have a lot of improvements they need to make, and there's not much room to make those improvements with where they are, cap space-wise, where they are, with other things as well. So, I think that could potentially favor Glenn as well. So that's the whole Glenn thing. Of course, he is a first-time guy, first-time DC. Road, but ideally, he played, he saw things turn around. Ideally, he brings a different perspective. There's a lot of people that talk about, his level of accountability that he has in Detroit. And ideally for me, I would just hope that he saw Dan Campbell a first time into an organization that was a complete disaster. It was a dumpster fire. Detroit was right where we are right now. The laughing stock of the NFL. It got so bad they wanted to take the Lions off Thanksgiving. That's how bad it got for them. And he saw them turn it around. He's able to do it. So he takes some of that over here. Maybe he brings Spielman with him, which is a potential intriguing candidate, a potential duo. Maybe you kind of two Detroit Lion guys know how to turn it around there. They bring it here. and you kind of get your Jets version of Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell here with Glenn and let's say a Spielman. The potential certainly there. You do wonder with the floor with some of these first-time guys, but you can make the case with the potential and the ceiling being a little bit higher. And in the whole Flores things as well. Now, he did provide a little bit more context on Flores because you know where I stand on Flores. I like Flores a lot. And I think I'd be totally on board with Brian Flores. I've made that clear. I know he's very 50-50 amongst Jets fans. It feels like you either want Flores or you don't. There's no in between. One of the things that I think has kind of taken Jet fans a little bit away from Flores is the whole Ryan Grigson connection. Both right now are in Minnesota, and there's been some reports recently that Flores and Grigson are like a package deal. Like if they hire Grigson, that means Flores is coming here, or vice versa. And that's not necessarily the case. Cimini also spoke with Will Parkinson on the Turn on the Jets podcast yesterday that he would be surprised, actually, if Grigson became the New York Jets general manager. He also said, quote, I think Grigson more so would like to align himself with Flores than the other way around. So it feels like Grigson more so wants Flores than Flores would want to come here and work with Grigson. So it does make that interesting that if the Jets really want Flores, Grigson might not be the guy to get Flores here. He might not be ultimately end up being the general manager, which I think should be a positive for Jet fans because, to be honest, Grigson just doesn't cut it for me. I mean, this was a guy that, he drafted Andrew Luck in 2012, but anybody in America could have drafted Andrew Luck in that draft with the first pick, right? Everybody knew Andrew Luck, generational talent. He was the consensus guy. That it didn't take a whole lot to do that. It's what he did to Andrew Luck. I know what you look at his record and you say, oh, he made the playoffs in 3 of his 5 years. He never had a losing season. He went 49-31 in 5 years. You look at all that, there's context to it. You need to add context to the record. You can't just look at it and say, oh, he made the playoffs 3 in his 5 years, never had a losing season. No, he took Andrew Luck and drove him into the ground by not building an offensive line ahead of him. And his draft classes from 2012 onwards were horrendous. I mean, he made Andrew Luck retire when he was 30. That's ridiculous. So I would stay away from him. And I think that's also maybe caused some Jets fans to go against Flores because of that potential duo, the two right now currently in Minnesota. But it'll be interesting. Flores, Glenn, it feels like they're the top two. I would stay away from Grigson. So I think from Cimini's perspective, that is certainly a positive. I'd go after more of a Dimitrov. I would go after more of a Borgonzi, somebody like that over Grigson, who completely blew up in Indy. Let's be honest. He took a really good team and drove it into the ground. I don't think there's any surprise that he made the playoffs his first 3 years. And in the next two, he went 16-16 the next 2 seasons and got fired. He took a really good team and made it worse progressively. And that's why they fired him, after 5 years. And that's why his last 2 years, he missed the playoffs because the roster got progressively worse. Also, just some more notes on Glenn, going back to him here for a second. Schefter feels Glenn is square in play with he said, quote, he's in play there. He feels Glenn's going to get the job. Schefter, feels like he is definitely a front runner. He also mentions the Jets search, which is where I kind of want to get to next here with this podcast, is he feels the Jets search is expanding rather than contracting. And you guys know where I stand. I wanted Vrabel. He was my number one guy that the Jets interviewed, that the Jets at least showed interest in. I think he was most Jets fans' number one guy. Either way, you move on. He went to the Patriots. It is what it is. We all knew that was happening. You guys know where I stand. Vrabel or Flores, Glenn, top 2 guys for me right now. Now, the one problem I have, and I want to make this clear, I like the whole idea of the Jets. I have no problem with the Jets going out there and interviewing a long list of candidates. I have no problem with them casting a wide net search where they interview a lot of names, get a lot of different perspectives and all that stuff. I understand it. I get it. The New York Jets coaching list is now up to 16 names with today's interview request for Joe Witt Jr. Just to give you a quick background on him. He's been in the NFL since 2007, defensive mind. He's been with the Falcons, the Packers, the Cowboys, and now this year under Dan Quinn is the Commanders' defensive coordinator. The first time in his career he's been a defensive coordinator. So he's been in the NFL for a while, but he lacks experience at DC, and of course doesn't have any NFL head coaching experience. So nothing against Joe Witt, but I don't think he's going to get hired, nor would I do it. It's just another random name to add to, let's be honest, a very random list of candidates. Here's the Jets head coaching list. Again, 16 names, 8 have been interviewed already, 8 requested. Here are the names that have been interviewed. Aaron Glenn, Matt Nagy, Ron Rivera, Rex Ryan, Steve Spagnuolo, Jeff Ulbrich, Darren Rizzi, Mike Locksley. Let's be real here. Outside of Aaron Glenn, does anybody move the needle for you on that list? Matt Nagy doesn't for me. Rex Ryan, no. He's not even going to get the job. Ron Rivera, no. Steve Spagnuolo, no. Jeff Ulbrich, shouldn't even, I'm not trying to be mean. That's like just a courtesy thing, right? You're the interim coach. We're going to interview you. You know, honestly, he doesn't even really count in my book, but he's on the list anyway. No. Darren Rizzi, no. Mike Locksley went 4-8 this year at Maryland. No. You look at the requested. Brian Flores, Josh McCown, Joe Brady, Arthur Smith, Vance Joseph, Joe Witt Jr., Bobby Slowick, Brian Greasy. No on Greasy. He's been a quarterback's coach for 2 years. You're not going to thrust him into New York as a head coach. Josh McCown, like him a lot as a potential OC. One of the reasons why I like Flores as a potential coach is his offensive staff that could be headlined by Josh McCown. I like the idea of that, but not as a head coach. The guy's been a quarterback's coach for a couple years now. You're just going to thrust him into being a head coach and completely skip being an offensive coordinator? No. Flores, okay. Need to get into other names. Arthur Smith, Vance Joseph, mentioned Joe Witt Jr. I'm out on Bobby Slowick. You want to say Joe Brady? All right. I would be willing to take if you don't get Glenn and you don't get Flores and you wanted to take a risk on a first-time OC, Joe Brady would be the guy I would take a risk on. He's not my top options, but he would be the guy if everything else fails and you can't get what feels like the 2 favorites right now for the job, Flores or Glenn. Brady would be a guy I would be willing to take a dart throw on, take a flyer on or take a risk on rather than some of these other names. I would be willing to do that. But my point here is this. You're going to interview, and nothing against these guys, but you're going to interview Joe Witt Jr. You're going to interview Mike Locksley. You're going to interview Arthur Smith, Vance Joseph, Matt Nagy. Let's just talk about that. We talk about wanting experienced coaches that have proven resumes, that have backgrounds, that have at least coached before, right? And instead you're interviewing the likes of Vance Joseph and Arthur Smith and Ron Rivera and Rex Ryan. Nothing against Ron Rivera, but we know he's all well out of his prime now. His message, his way of coaching just does not get through to the modern player. We saw it in Washington. His time has passed. Matt Nagy. And you're not going to reach out to John Gruden. You're not going to reach out to Pete Carroll. Guys, and I want to make this clear. I think there's a lot of Jet fans out there. Now, there is certain situations. Like Ben Johnson did not want to come here. He made that clear. He did not want to come here. All right. You can't force him to take an interview. If he doesn't want to come here, he doesn't want to come here. But these other names, we just straight up hear, the Jets aren't interested in. Right? We heard the other day the Jets are not interested in John Gruden. Why? Why are you not interested in John Gruden? Mike McCarthy just became available. There was some rumors that came out from Rich Cimini, actually, that said Mike McCarthy would actually could be interested in the Jets job because of Aaron Rodgers here. But the Jets supposedly aren't interested. You want to know why? Because they found too many red flags in 2019. So let me add this up for a second. They found too many red flags for Mike McCarthy in 2019, yet Adam Gase had had a lot of green flags. You got a call from Peyton Manning and said, hire Adam Gase. How's that working for you? Like, it just doesn't make sense. You're not going to interview Pete Carroll. Again, these guys have never said no. The Jets just aren't putting in requests. The Jets just aren't interested. How are you not interested in Pete Carroll, a Super Bowl winning coach? Sustained success at multiple levels. I mean, Pete Carroll, come on now. Look what the guy's done since 2010. 2 Super Bowl appearances, playoffs year in and year out with Seattle. And even if he doesn't want to be a coach anymore, which is possible, and even if you don't want him to coach because maybe it'd only be a 2-3 year thing, okay, at least maybe talk to him about maybe a potential front office role. And if he doesn't want to come to the East Coast, he doesn't want to go here, fine. But at least reach out. At least. You can't cast a wide net and then go and interview Vance Joseph and Matt Nagy and Arthur Smith and Mike Loxley, and those be the guys. You can't sit here on Tuesday, January 14th, when Mike McCarthy just became available, and instead you're putting in an interview request for a guy that's been a defensive coordinator for 1 season. 1 season. They want to interview Brian Greasy, who's been a quarterback's coach for 2 years. Are you really? Really? They're leaving a lot of top candidates out there. And I know there's a lot of talks about Tomlin remaining in Pittsburgh, but at least reach out to Pittsburgh. At least reach out to him. What do they say? No, we're not trading him. Fine. You know, I find it so funny with the Jets, and maybe I'm being too negative. I don't know. I just would have hoped, and I tried to be patient at the early on in this process, that they would eventually put in for a Gruden, that they would eventually put in for a Pete Carroll. Now McCarthy becoming available, right? They haven't put in for any of those guys. From what we hear, they're not interested in any of those guys for no particular reason. All 3 of those coaches have done more recently than the Jets have. Heck, Gruden's won a Super Bowl since 2000. The Jets have had 1 playoff game since 2000. Gruden's also a proven guy. And let's be honest, if the emails never gotten away from the Raiders, he probably would have made the playoffs that year because Rick Bisaccia did. I'm not going to go down that road, but you get my point. Where's McCarthy on this list? Where's Pete Carroll on this list? Where's John Gruden on this list? At least call and do your due diligence and say, you know what? Call up the Steelers. Is Tomlin available? No. Is it true that you guys are keeping him? Yes. Okay, fine. The Jets right now, and even some fans, act like this organization. They're like, you know, some fans don't want McCarthy, or some people don't want, or the Jets aren't interested. Too many red flags. Who are the Jets to say that a candidate like Mike McCarthy or a candidate like a John Gruden or a Pete Carroll, they're not interested in when this organization hasn't done a dang thing in 14 years? They haven't. All of these coaches have won more than this franchise has in the last decade. Plus, they haven't made the playoffs in 14 years. They've had 9 straight seasons. They've had 9 straight losing seasons. They've had 5 straight seasons of at least 10 or more losses. They haven't hosted a playoff game since January of 2003. Just on Sunday, it was the 56th year anniversary for Super Bowl III. Joe Namath guarantee. We're still replaying Bart Scott can't wait clips from 2010. Do we realize where this organization's at right now? Do we realize what this organization needs? And some of the names that are out there and some of the names that are on the Jets list just don't add up. The minute Pete Carroll, John Gruden, or Mike McCarthy would walk into this building, they would be the most winning coach this team has had since Parcells, period. And who are the Jets to say that these guys have too many red flags when they've done more themselves than this organization has done? Crazy, 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 crazy. I don't get it. I don't get it. I know people want to talk about, the playoff stuff and all this with McCarthy or even Tomlin. The Jets need to build a foundation. They need to get to the playoffs first before you can even start talking about Super Bowl. You know, in a Tomlin situation, sometimes a change of scenery is best. Look what happened to Andy Reid going from Philly to Kansas City. It took him a couple years in Kansas City, but he finally figured out they got that quarterback. Who's to say that Tomlin in a new scenery, that could potentially happen? I know McCarthy's going on his third team, but you know that this guy's going to set a winning culture. He's going to come here. He's an offensive mind. A lot of people want an offensive mind, but they're all first-time options. McCarthy kind of takes both. He's an offensive mind, and he's a proven guy. But you look at McCarthy, right? You at least come here and get 11, 12 wins, and you're going to make the playoffs, and you're going to set a winning culture. At least you set yourself up. At least you go into every season knowing you've got a chance. And who knows, with the talent on this roster, you potentially figure out the quarterback and find a long-term option. Who knows what can happen? I'd rather that instead of taking a chance on one of these washed-up retreads that have done absolutely nothing, like Arthur Smith. The Jets are more interested in Arthur Smith, who went 21-30 in his 3 years in Atlanta, than Pete Carroll, Gruden, and McCarthy. Doesn't make sense. So, again, Flores and Glenn are at the top of my list. And if either of those guys get hired, I would be on board with it. There's obviously concerns with both of them. None of these candidates are perfect. I've said that for a while now. That's why they're available. I don't know if I'm just exhausted. I don't know if I'm just getting tired of looking at all these candidates. Maybe that's it, but I don't know, man. I'm just getting really frustrated with how this search continues to play out. I mean, we're a week into this and we're still requesting interviews, and we're requesting interviews for guys that have been coordinators for only a year or two, or guys that have, like no names. Let's just tell like it is, no names. Nothing against the guy, but nobody really knows who Joe Witt Jr. is. Barely any people know that Mike Loxley even coaches football. All right. And you're interviewing proven NFL coaches that have all won and have all won Super Bowls before in an organization that hasn't sniffed the playoffs since 2010. Doesn't totally make sense. And I hope they get it right. And again, I'd be on board with a Flores or Glenn. But outside of those two guys, if you walk away and you walk away, I don't know. I just have a hard time walking away from this coaching search as a whole without even trying to request an interview, without at least talking to a McCarthy, to a Pete Carroll, to a John Gruden, any of those guys. I just do. So that's how I view it. Let me know what you think in the comments section down below. Agree, disagree, agree to disagree. Again, I like the whole idea of casting a wide net. I'd much rather that than what Christopher Johnson and the Jets did back in 2019 when he was leading the search and get a call from Peyton Manning that says, oh, hire Adam Gase, and they hire Adam Gase. I like this type of search. I like that they're casting a wide net, but it does also get to a point where they've got to start to narrow their list. I mean, Mike Borgonzi is going for a second interview with the Titans, I believe either today or tomorrow. So these other teams are already going for second round of interviews. The Jets still have 8 interviews that they've got to still go through to get through the first round of head coaches. And they've still got interviews they got to get through for the general manager. Like, it's January 14th. The process has got to speed up. You look at a team like the Vikings. Flores is now fully available. They're eliminated. They're done. They're fully available. You can in-person interviews are next. Like, they got to, get going here a little bit. And the fact that, any of these other names are still not on the list is just a little frustrating when you see that they're still going out and interviewing guys and requesting interviews for just a bunch of inexperienced guys when there's 3 proven winners out there. So that's just where I stand. But anyway, that'll do it. We'll have a lot more content coming your way the rest of this week. So stay tuned. Any more news that comes out from the Jets coaching front, we will discuss it. Let me know what you think about Flores and Glenn, and any of your other thoughts on the Jets coaching search and the latest updates. Until next time, JETS, 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 Jets.